INFJs are rare. They make up just a small percentage of the population, yet they leave a deep impression on almost everyone they meet. There's something about them that pulls people in, but also pushes them away. They're the kind of person you think you understand, right before they completely surprise you. And that contrast can be maddening. On the outside, INFJs often come across as calm, kind, and collected. But under that surface is a mind that never stops thinking. They're constantly processing feelings, reading between the lines, and searching for meaning. This mental intensity is part of what makes them so unique, and also part of what makes them hard to be around for long periods of time. It's not because they're difficult on purpose. In fact, INFJs usually try very hard to be easygoing, but their brain works in a way that challenges people. It brings out insecurities, it breaks social norms, it questions what's fake and demands what's real. That pressure can make people uncomfortable, confused, or even angry without really knowing why. In this video, we're going to look at the 6 core reasons why the INFJ mind drives people insane. We'll explore how their emotional depth, thought patterns, and values affect the way others experience them. Whether you're an INFJ trying to understand yourself better, or someone trying to understand an INFJ in your life, this video will shine a light on what's really going on beneath the surface. Reason number 1, deep emotional insight. Most people are used to hiding things. They smile when they're sad. They say they're fine when they're not. But when they're around an INFJ, that mask doesn't always work. One of the first things that drives people crazy about the INFJ mind is how quickly and deeply it picks up on unspoken emotions. You can walk into a room with an INFJ and say, everything is great, but if you're lying, they'll probably know. This emotional insight isn't just about being observant. It's built into how the INFJ brain works. They naturally notice body language, tone of voice, word choice, and subtle shifts in energy. Even if you don't say anything, they're picking up signals. And once they do, their brain starts working to figure out what those signals mean. Not out of nosiness, but because understanding emotions is part of how they navigate the world. For some people, this is comforting. It feels good to be seen without having to explain yourself. But for others, it's unsettling. It can feel like the INFJ is reading your mind or seeing things you didn't give permission to show. And in a world where most people hide their true feelings, that kind of awareness can feel threatening. The INFJ also doesn't just sense what you're feeling, they often feel it with you. Their empathy is so strong that they absorb the emotions of others. If someone is upset, the INFJ doesn't just notice. They start to feel the weight of that pain themselves. This can be helpful in emotional situations, but it can also be intense for both sides. The INFJ ends up carrying a lot of emotional energy that isn't theirs, and the person on the other side might feel exposed or overwhelmed by how deeply the INFJ connects to what they're going through. This emotional depth also means the INFJ asks questions that most people avoid. They won't just ask how your day was. They'll ask how you really feel about your job, your relationship, your purpose in life. And they'll want real answers, not because they're being nosy, but because shallow conversation doesn't satisfy them. This kind of emotional digging can make people uncomfortable, especially if they're not used to being vulnerable. And if someone lies to an INFJ, that's when things get even more complicated. INFJs often know they're being lied to. They might not say anything at first. They might just smile and nod. But inside, something shifts. They start pulling back. They trust a little less. And once that trust is damaged, it's hard to get back. The other person might feel confused, wondering why the INFJ suddenly feels distant. But the truth is, the INFJ already figured out something wasn't right. Their emotional insight also shows up in how they handle conflict. INFJs don't usually like confrontation, but when it happens, they approach it differently. They don't yell or insult. They point out emotional truths. They say things like, I don't think you're angry at me, I think you're angry at yourself. Or, I know you say you're fine, but I feel like you're carrying something heavy. These statements can cut deep, not because they're cruel, but because they're accurate. And that kind of truth can shake people. Another thing that drives people crazy is how INFJs seem to just know things. They can often sense when a relationship is falling apart before it happens. They might predict someone's reaction to a situation before it even happens. It's not magic, it's their emotional radar at work. But to people who don't think this way, it can feel strange or even intimidating. Over time, this insight can push people away. Not because the INFJ is doing anything wrong, but because being seen that clearly is uncomfortable. Some people would rather stay in denial than face what the INFJ brings to light. So they get defensive. They pull away. They accuse the INFJ of overthinking or being too intense. And in some cases, they leave altogether. But here's the thing. INFJs don't want to drive people away. They want connection. They want honesty. They want depth. The problem is, their mind goes to emotional places that most people aren't prepared to visit. And unless someone is open and willing to go there with them, that emotional connection starts to feel one-sided. INFJs also have a hard time turning off this part of their brain. Even when they want to relax, their mind is still processing emotions, still analyzing people, still feeling things deeply. That constant emotional awareness makes everyday life more exhausting. But it also makes them more aware of everything going on around them, including things that other people would rather not acknowledge. So when someone says, "You think too much," or "Why do you care so much?" they're not just commenting on the INFJ's behavior. They're reacting to the discomfort of being seen so clearly. And sometimes, being around someone who sees that much feels like too much. INFJs can't help the way their mind works. They didn't choose to feel this deeply or notice this much. But once you understand that their emotional insight isn't a threat, it's a gift, you start to see the power in it. And for those who can handle that level of emotional depth, a relationship with an INFJ can be one of the most meaningful connections they'll ever have. Reason number 2, complex inner world. On the outside, INFJs often appear calm and even predictable. But inside, their mind is anything but simple. One of the most confusing things about INFJs is that they live in a world most people can't see. Their thoughts are layered, their emotions run deep, and their imagination is always active. This inner world is part of what makes them special, but it also drives people crazy. The INFJ mind is like a puzzle that keeps shifting. They're constantly thinking about ideas, possibilities, and patterns. Their brain doesn't just process what's happening right now. It's also remembering the past, imagining the future, and wondering what things mean on a deeper level. That kind of mental activity can make them seem distant or hard to understand. Sometimes they zone out in the middle of a conversation, not because they're bored, but because their brain has already taken the conversation and gone 10 layers deeper. They might be thinking about what was really meant, what wasn't said, what the long-term consequences are, and by the time they come back to the present moment, the people around them are wondering what just happened. This habit of disappearing into their mind can be frustrating to others, especially people who value quick answers, small talk, or fast decisions. INFJs don't rush. They take time to reflect, and that reflection happens in silence, often without warning. Their inner world is also filled with ideas and dreams. They think about how society could be better, how relationships could be deeper, how they could live a life that truly matters. These thoughts are important to them. They aren't just daydreams. They're part of who they are. But because they don't always share these thoughts out loud, people assume INFJs are just quiet or shy. In reality, their mind is working overtime. When they do try to share their ideas, it can come out in a way that confuses people. Their thoughts are often complex and abstract. They might start in the middle of an idea, or make connections that others don't immediately follow. This can lead to people misunderstanding them or thinking they're being vague, when in fact, the INFJ just struggles to simplify what's happening in their head. This disconnect between their rich inner world and their outer expression can make communication hard. The INFJ might feel like nobody really gets them, and the people around them might feel left out or confused. Sometimes that mismatch creates tension in relationships. People want clarity, but INFJs value depth, and sometimes those things don't line up. Their complex thinking also affects how they make decisions. They don't just consider what's practical or logical. They think about how it will feel, how it will affect others, what the long-term meaning is. That process takes time, and to people who want quick answers, it can be maddening. At the same time, their complexity can make them unpredictable. One day they might be open and talkative. The next day they need space and silence. This isn't moodiness. It's just that their inner world is constantly shifting, and they respond to those inner shifts in real time. This mental depth also makes them crave meaning in everything. They don't want surface-level friendships, fake conversations, or mindless tasks. They want purpose. They want understanding. They want something real. And when they don't find it, they pull back. Not out of rudeness, but because their mind isn't built for anything else. To some, this makes INFJs feel distant or even cold. But the truth is, they're just hard to read because so much of what they think and feel never gets said. It stays inside where it's safe, and unless someone takes the time to truly understand them, that distance remains. But for those who do get a glimpse into the INFJ's inner world, it's worth it. Because inside that quiet person is a mind filled with creativity, empathy, and insight. A mind that's always searching for connection, and meaning and truth. And while that level of complexity may be hard to handle, it's also what makes the INFJ unforgettable. Reason number 3, high expectations. NFJs don't expect perfection, but they do expect depth. They expect sincerity, and they expect people to mean what they say. These expectations come from how seriously they take relationships and personal integrity. But to others, those expectations can feel like pressure, or even judgment. One of the reasons the INFJ mind drives people insane is because it doesn't settle for surface-level anything. Whether it's a friendship, a job, or a life goal, they want it to be meaningful. If something feels fake, forced, or shallow, they lose interest quickly, and they don't hide it well. This becomes an issue when others don't share the same values. If someone is okay with just going through the motions, playing along, or doing what's easy, they might feel uncomfortable around the INFJ, because the INFJ will quietly expect more honesty, more effort, more purpose. These expectations apply most strongly in relationships. INFJs are looking for real emotional connection. They're not interested in small talk that never goes anywhere or relationships that lack depth. If someone wants to be close to an INFJ, they need to be open, emotionally aware, and willing to grow. That's not easy for everyone. When people sense those expectations, they sometimes feel judged, even if the INFJ hasn't said anything. The INFJ's quiet observation, their thoughtful responses, and their ability to read between the lines can make others feel exposed. Not because the INFJ is trying to make them uncomfortable, but because they're holding a mirror up without meaning to. This leads to a common misunderstanding. People think INFJs are too picky or too intense. In reality, they're just selective. They're not looking for quantity in relationships. They want quality, and when they don't find it, they prefer to be alone, rather than pretend something is working when it isn't. Their high expectations also extend to themselves. INFJs tend to be perfectionists, always trying to be better, do more, and meet the high standards they set internally. This self-pressure often makes them critical of their own flaws, and that same sharp eye can spill over into how they view others. They don't expect others to be perfect, but they do expect others to care, to try, and to be real. This can lead to frustration. If a friend breaks a promise or acts dishonestly, the INFJ feels it deeply. It's not just about what happened, it's about what it means. Was the person being careless? Did they not value the relationship as much as the INFJ did? Those questions don't go away easily. And while the INFJ might forgive, they don't forget quickly. Their trust, once damaged, takes time to rebuild. People who don't understand this might accuse the INFJ of holding grudges. But that's not it. What's really happening is that the INFJ is adjusting their expectations. They've taken a mental note about what kind of behavior they can expect from someone. And once they've made that shift, they treat the relationship differently, not out of bitterness, but out of self-protection. This pattern can make relationships with INFJs feel intense. There's no coasting, no playing it safe. You're either all in or it doesn't last. And that intensity, while meaningful to the right person, can overwhelm those who aren't ready for it. Another layer of this is that INFJs don't always explain their expectations clearly. They assume people understand what they value. And when others fall short, they're hurt, but don't always speak up. Instead, they pull back. They grow quiet, and the other person is left confused, not realizing what went wrong. So why do INFJs hold such high standards? It's because they take life seriously. They think deeply, they feel deeply, and they believe that every connection should be intentional. They know how short life is, and they don't want to waste time on anything that doesn't align with who they are. This mindset isn't meant to be hurtful. It's not about being better than anyone. It's about honoring what matters. And when someone meets them at that level, when someone shows up with honesty and heart, the INFJ gives back fully. Their loyalty is strong, their support is deep, and their love is real. But until that connection is proven, the INFJ keeps their expectations high. They won't fake it. They won't settle. And for some, that's just too much. Reason number 4. Need for authenticity. Authenticity isn't a preference for INFJs. It's a requirement. They can feel when someone is faking, pretending, or performing, and it drives them crazy. But more than that, it drives them away. INFJs need realness. Without it, they can't connect. And that need can confuse or frustrate people who are used to hiding parts of themselves. From a young age, INFJs tend to ask deep questions and challenge social expectations. They notice when someone's actions don't match their words. They hear the pause before someone answers. They feel the tension in a fake smile. Their brain is constantly scanning for signals that say, this person is not being real. When they sense inauthenticity, they don't always call it out. Instead, they grow quiet. They distance themselves. They lose interest in the conversation or the relationship altogether. That reaction can feel cold or harsh to people who don't understand what's going on. What the INFJ is really doing is protecting themselves. They know that fake connections are not only draining, they're damaging. Pretending to enjoy a conversation or acting like everything's fine when it isn't feels wrong to them. So they choose truth, even if it makes things awkward. This truth-seeking behavior also shows up in how INFJs present themselves. Most of them are not flashy or overly concerned with image. They care more about what's real than what looks good. They want their words to mean something. They want their actions to reflect who they really are, and they expect the same from others. That can be unsettling in a world that often rewards pretending. Many people are taught to fit in, to keep things light, to avoid rocking the boat. INFJs don't follow that script. They're not interested in playing social games or keeping things on the surface. If a situation feels fake, they either try to fix it or they walk away. This also affects how they make friends. INFJs tend to avoid large groups and superficial interactions. They're drawn to people who are honest, even if they're messy. They prefer awkward truth over polished lies. And once they find someone who's real with them, they bond deeply. Their need for authenticity also applies to their career and purpose in life. INFJs want to do work that matters. They struggle in environments where people are fake, where values don't align, or where everything is about appearances. If they can't be themselves, they don't last long. And if they see dishonesty in leadership or business practices, it eats at them. In romantic relationships, their need for authenticity becomes even more intense. They want to know the real person behind the mask. They want emotional honesty, vulnerability, depth, and they'll offer the same in return. But if their partner hides behind small talk or avoids hard conversations, the INFJ will sense it, and it won't sit well. This creates a challenge. Not everyone is ready to be that open. Some people need time to feel safe. Others just aren't used to being fully seen. The INFJ can sometimes come across as demanding or intense because of how quickly they want to connect on a deeper level. They don't mean to rush things, but to them, there's no point in playing along with a version of the truth. They'd rather be alone than be with someone who's pretending, and that standard can drive others away or make them step up and show their true self. One reason INFJs value authenticity so much is because they spend so much time trying to be true to themselves. They constantly question their own motives. They examine their beliefs. They try to live in a way that matches their values. And when they sense someone else isn't doing the same, it creates a disconnect. At the same time, INFJs understand that people aren't perfect. They don't expect everyone to bare their soul on day one, but they do expect honesty. They want effort, and they want to feel like the person they're with is being real, even if they're still figuring things out. When someone is open, even just a little, the INFJ responds with warmth and compassion. But when someone is fake, dismissive, or emotionally unavailable, the INFJ shuts down, not out of spite, but because their mind and heart are wired for truth. Anything less feels empty. In the end, INFJs need authenticity because it's the only way they feel safe. It's the only way they can build trust. And for those who aren't used to that level of honesty, it can be uncomfortable. But for those who can meet them in that space, the connection is rare and real. Reason number 5. Sensitivity to injustice. INFJs have a deep sense of what's right and wrong. It's not based on rules or rewards. It comes from within. They feel moral tension in their body. When they see unfairness, cruelty, or dishonesty, it hits them hard. They don't just disagree with it. They feel it, and they often can't stay silent. This deep reaction to injustice can confuse people. Most people learn to let things slide. They avoid conflict. They say, "It's not my problem." INFJs don't think that way. If they see someone being treated unfairly, something in them activates. They can't help it. They feel called to speak up, to protect, or to walk away from anything that violates their sense of integrity. This kind of reaction can make others uncomfortable, especially in situations where people have learned to accept things as they are. The INFJ will point out the issue that everyone else is trying to ignore, and that makes them stand out, sometimes in a good way, sometimes not. Their sensitivity to injustice also makes them intense about honesty. They don't understand how people can lie so easily. They don't get why some people cheat, manipulate, or betray others without remorse. When that happens to them, or someone they care about, it breaks something inside them, and they never see that person the same way again. In group settings, INFJs are often the ones who speak up for someone being ignored or mistreated. They'll challenge unfair policies or question authority figures who abuse their power. Even if they're quiet most of the time, when it comes to fairness, they find their voice. But this moral courage comes with a cost. It can make them feel isolated, like they're always the one who cares too much, or the one who can't just let things go. It also puts them at risk of being labeled too sensitive or too serious by people who don't understand where they're coming from. What others don't always see is that this sensitivity is rooted in care. INFJs are not trying to be difficult. They just can't stand to watch people be hurt. They carry a deep belief that the world should be better, kinder, and more just. And when that belief is challenged, they feel it as a personal wound. Over time, this sensitivity makes them careful about who they surround themselves with. They avoid people who play games, twist the truth, or treat others badly. Once they spot a pattern of disrespect, they disconnect. Not out of hate, but because their peace depends on being around integrity. This value also shapes their goals. INFJs often pursue careers or projects that align with justice, fairness, or healing. They become counselors, advocates, writers, or teachers. They want to make a difference, not for recognition, but because it feels like a calling. Their deep care for justice also affects their self-worth. When they fail to stand up for what's right, they don't just feel regret, they feel guilt. They replay the moment. They ask why they stayed quiet, and they promise themselves they'll do better next time. That level of self-awareness is part of what makes them stronger, but it can also wear them down. For people who aren't used to thinking about fairness or ethics in everyday life, the INFJ's intensity can feel overwhelming. But that intensity comes from love. Love for people, love for truth, love for a better world. And even if that passion makes others uncomfortable, the INFJ won't let it go. Because to them, silence in the face of injustice is just another form of betrayal. Reason number 6, difficulty expressing themselves. INFJs have a lot going on inside. Their thoughts are complex. Their emotions run deep. But when it comes time to actually explain all of that, they often struggle. This difficulty in expressing themselves clearly and fully can frustrate not only the INFJ, but also the people trying to understand them. What makes this hard is that INFJs usually know exactly what they're feeling. They're very aware of what's going on inside. They just can't always find the right words to match it. Thoughts swirl around in their head in full color, with depth and emotion. But when they try to speak, it comes out muted or incomplete. This gap between what they feel and what they say can make communication exhausting. This issue is even more noticeable when they're upset. When emotions are high, their inner world becomes louder and more chaotic. They might freeze in the middle of an argument. They might want to explain how they feel, but can't organize their thoughts fast enough. And when they finally speak, they worry it didn't come out right. That can lead to misunderstandings or silence. In relationships, this can be confusing for others. They might assume the INFJ is hiding something or being distant on purpose. In reality, the INFJ just doesn't know how to translate their thoughts in the moment. They might need time, minutes, hours, or even days, to figure out how to express what they're going through. And even then, it may come out in writing instead of conversation. Writing is often a much easier form of expression for INFJs. It gives them time to reflect, organize, and choose words carefully. Through writing, they can say exactly what they mean without the pressure of a real-time response. That's why many INFJs keep journals, send long texts, or prefer email over phone calls. It's not about being cold, it's about getting it right. This need for time also means INFJs don't always respond the way others expect. In the middle of a heated moment, they may go quiet. Not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed. They're not ready to talk until they've sorted through everything internally. That pause is how they avoid saying something they don't mean, but it can be misread as avoidance or disinterest. Their struggle to express themselves can also make them overly careful. They might rehearse conversations in their head before they happen. They might edit a message 5 times before hitting send. They don't want to be misunderstood. They don't want to hurt anyone. So they overthink how to communicate, and sometimes that leads to saying nothing at all. When people push them to speak faster or explain something right away, it adds pressure, and that pressure makes it even harder to talk. The INFJ might shut down completely, not because they don't have anything to say, but because they can't access the right words under stress. They often need calm, safety, and time to open up. This difficulty also shows up when they're trying to set boundaries or express needs. INFJs care deeply about others, and they often avoid conflict. So when they need to speak up, it feels unnatural. They fear being misunderstood, upsetting someone, or coming off as selfish. That fear keeps them quiet longer than they should be, and by the time they finally speak, the frustration might come out stronger than intended. This dynamic can lead to emotional bottlenecks. The INFJ holds in so much for so long that when it finally comes out, it surprises everyone, including themselves. People around them might wonder where the sudden emotion came from, but the INFJ has been carrying it silently, waiting for the right moment that never came. Because they struggle to express themselves clearly, they often feel misunderstood. They might try to explain something important and then walk away feeling like they failed. That experience adds to their inner frustration and can make them hesitant to try again. Over time, some INFJs learn to just keep things to themselves rather than risk confusion. But this pattern creates emotional distance. It leaves others guessing, and it makes the INFJ feel alone in their own experience. Even when they're surrounded by people, they might feel like no one really knows them. Not because others don't care, but because the INFJ can't quite bridge the gap between what's inside and what's shared. Despite all this, INFJs want connection. They want to be known. They just need patience. The people who take the time to listen, ask thoughtful questions, and create space for silence, those are the people INFJs open up to. And once they do, their words come with meaning, depth, and honesty. In the end, their difficulty with expression isn't a flaw. It's a result of how layered their inner world is. When someone truly listens and doesn't rush them, INFJs eventually find their voice. And when they speak from that place of trust, what they say is worth hearing. The INFJ mind is not simple. It's layered, emotional, and always working. That complexity can be inspiring, but it can also be frustrating. For the INFJ, it means constantly balancing thoughts, feelings, and a deep need for meaning. For others, it means being around someone who doesn't follow social scripts, who asks hard questions, and who sees things most people miss. But the same traits that confuse people are the traits that make INFJs so rare and valuable. Their emotional insight brings comfort. Their inner world creates beauty. Their high expectations push others to grow. Their need for truth builds strong, honest connections. Their passion for justice gives them courage. Their quiet struggle with words makes them careful communicators. Being around an INFJ takes patience. It takes a willingness to go deeper, to stay open. So yes, the INFJ mind might drive people insane at times, but it also opens doors to insight, emotion, and meaning that few others can offer.